live in interesting times. For the headlines.
Article 1 is adopted.
The U.S. House of Representatives votes to impeach President Trump for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress.
On this vote,
a state of emergency is declared in Australia's most populated region as an unprecedented heat wave fans out of control bushfires. And Australia set a record for its hottest day ever for a second straight day with an average national maximum temperature of 41.9 degrees Celsius or 107.4 degrees Fahrenheit, a full degree higher than the previous mark. And Indian police ordered a shutdown of mobile networks in parts of New Delhi as thousands of protesters nationwide defy bans of assembly in growing anger at a new citizenship law seen as anti-Muslim. I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us, and now to the news. The U.S. House of Representatives voted to impeach President Trump for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. Here's Ellen Aguilar for the report.
Article 1 is adopted.
U.S. President Donald J. Trump has been impeached for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. This is what we know. After 8 long hours of debates and arguments between Republicans and Democrats, the House of Representatives voted to impeach the 45th President of the United States, making Trump the third sitting president to be impeached in American history. On the first article, Abuse of Power, Trump pressured Ukraine to conduct an investigation on his political rival, former Vice President Joe Biden Jr. The House voted 230 to 197. On the second article, Obstruction of Congress, where Trump tried to cover up his actions to avoid Congress investigation, the House voted 229 to 198.
Article 2 is adopted.
As for Trump's reaction during his campaign rally in Battle Creek, Michigan,
but while we're creating jobs, fighting for Michigan workers, and achieving numbers that you've never seen before, incredible victories for the American people are happening. The radical left in Congress is consumed with hatred and envy and rage. You see what's going on. I'll tell you, these people are crazy. They've been trying to impeach me from day one. They've been trying to impeach me from before I ran, okay? Because if you remember, when I ran, I went immediately to number one, never came off number one. Through their, I liked it, through their depraved actions today, crazy Nancy Pelosi's House Democrats have branded themselves with an eternal mark of shame, and it really is. It's a disgrace.
a trial is scheduled next month in the Senate following this impeachment. 2/3 majority is required for conviction and removal of Trump from office. Meanwhile, Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced at a press conference that there will be a delay in the submission of the articles of impeachment until she gets a sense of what will happen in the trial.
So far, we haven't seen anything that looks fair to us, so hopefully it will be fair, and when we see what that is, we'll send our managers. This is what I don't consider a fair trial. That Leader McConnell has stated that he's not an impartial juror, that he's going to take his cues, in quotes, from the White House, and he is working in total coordination with the White House counsel's office.
Let me just say that obviously Senator McConnell, by that declaration, has said that he is as in effect the foreman of the jury, is working with the defendant's counsel. That's not fair. We'll have to see what else, but that's certainly an indication of an intention to have an unfair trial.
Look, it's up to the senators to make their own decision, working together, hopefully in recognition of their witnesses that the president withheld from us, their documents that the president withheld from us, and we would hope that that information would be available in a trial to go to the next step, because that's another level in terms of conviction in terms of this. But right now, the president is impeached.
For Eagle News International, Ellen Aguilar reporting from the United States. Always one with 25.
Now, what did the House members say during the debate? Let's take a look.
It is tragic that the president's reckless actions make impeachment necessary. He gave us no choice. Article 1 is adopted. Article 2 is adopted.
This is a moment that you will read about in your history books. Today, I will vote to impeach the President of the United States. And I want you to know why. He broke our laws. He threatened our security. He abused the highest, most sacred office in our land.
Madam Speaker, we deserve better than this. Impeachment is the most consequential act the House of Representatives can undertake. It must not and cannot be based on a flawed process. It cannot come at the expense of minority rights or due process to the accused. It cannot be based on a vendetta against the President that the majority has pursued since the day it was elected.
Before you take this historic vote today, I want you to keep this in mind. When Jesus was falsely accused of treason, Pontius Pilate gave Jesus the opportunity to face his accusers. During that sham trial, Pontius Pilate afforded more rights to Jesus than the Democrats have afforded this president in this process.
So this vote, this day, is about one thing and one thing only. They hate this president. They hate those of us who voted for him. They think we're stupid. They think we made a mistake. They think Hillary Clinton should be the president, and they want to fix that.
Madam Speaker, I would remind the gentleman that if President Trump is impeached and removed, the new president will be Mike Pence, not Hillary Clinton.
In America, no one is above the law. Donald J. Trump sacrificed our national security in an effort to cheat in the next election. Why should we care about what the president did to Ukraine? Well, first of all, we should care about our allies. We should care about Ukraine. We should care about a country struggling to be free and a democracy. We used to care about democracy. We used to care about our allies. We used to stand up to Putin and Russia. There will be another president. And you may be one day, although you do not act like it, you may one day be in the majority. And you will want to hold a president accountable. And what will you say when that president says, you are a paper tiger, you have no oversight, I can ignore your subpoenas? What will you say? What will you argue? Well, no, that was different. Then we were in the minority.
I'm about to say something my Democratic colleagues hate to hear. Donald J. Trump is President of the United States. He is President today, he'll be President tomorrow, and he will be President when this impeachment is over. Democrats haven't just failed on process, has also failed on evidence. I've heard a lot of debate on this floor today.
But I haven't heard one member of this body dispute this simple fact. President Trump provided lethal aid to Ukraine. It came before the call, it came after the call, and it continues to this day.
Now, the prosecutors in the Democratic Party want to call witnesses. The defense, the White House, rejects the idea as laughable. Now, thus is the stage set for the third trial in history of a sitting U.S. president where the party of defendant President Donald Trump gets to set the rules, and some senators who will be jurors are already delivering their verdicts. 100 senators, 53 Republicans, and 47 Democrats will sit in judgment on one of the world's most powerful men. To remove him from office, 67 of them have to find him guilty, highly unlikely given the Republicans' numerical strength. Their numbers also mean they get to decide if witnesses can be called and which ones, how long prosecutors can take to present their case, and how long the trial will last. If the Senate doesn't want to try President Trump at all, it can simply dismiss the case by a simple majority vote. And given President Trump's political hold over his party, the rules can be dictated by the White House itself.
I said I would be totally surprised if there were 67 senators to remove the president. That remains my view. However, we are obligated under the Constitution to turn to it when it comes over, and we will.
I think it will be required to listen to the House's case based on the record assembled to impeach, that there will come a point when the House has had a fair chance to make their case, the President's had a chance to respond without witnesses on either side, then we'll move to final passage. But we're not going to impeach people because we have disagreements. If being unnerved by presidential action was the ground for impeachment, I would have impeached President Obama. I was unnerved by a lot of things he did with Benghazi and Fast and Furious, but it never rose the level of impeachable conduct. And I can tell you there was a lot of pressure on Republicans to impeach President Obama because people just didn't like him.
Now, John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, will be sworn in to preside over the trial. He will require the 100 senators who will sit in judgment to swear an oath. The next step, the procedures, is to be decided by the senators, but a battle has already erupted between McConnell and top Democrat Chuck Schumer over whether witnesses will be called and evidence demanded.
Listen to the leader's speech. I did not hear a single sentence, a single argument as to why the witnesses I suggested should not give testimony. Impeachment trials, like most trials, have witnesses. To have none would be an aberration.
The Senate is meant to act as judge and jury, to hear a trial, not to rerun the entire fact-finding investigation because angry partisans rushed sloppily through it. So now, the Senate Democratic leader would apparently like our chamber to do House Democrats' homework for them. He wants to volunteer the Senate's time and energy on a fishing expedition to see whether his own ideas could make Chairman Schiff's sloppy work more persuasive.
Now, those issues could prolong the trial from the 2 weeks McConnell has reportedly envisioned to over a month. Bill Clinton's trial, former President Bill Clinton's trial, ran for 5 weeks. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said after the vote in any case that she would not select House managers or send the impeachment articles to Senate until she is assured the proposed rules for the trial are fair.
So far, we haven't seen anything that looks fair to us, so hopefully it will be fair, and when we see what that is, we'll send our managers.
Meanwhile, Molly Reynolds, a senior fellow in governance studies at the Brookings Institute, said it is extremely unlikely that U.S. President Donald Trump would be removed from office after the Senate trial if the House of Representatives votes to impeach him, but a number of moderate Republican senators may nonetheless demand fairer and more complete proceedings during a trial. Let's listen in.
Where 100 senators will hear the case in a trial. That trial is presided over by the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, John Roberts. Exactly what that trial will look like, we still have some open questions there. So the Senate has some rules for what impeachment trials look like in terms of when it's likely to start. The Senate is supposed to sit for 6 days a week, every afternoon on the trial, whether there will be witnesses, whether they will receive additional evidence beyond what was already presented in the House. Those questions remain to be decided and are likely to be figured out through negotiations between the two-party leaders in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, who's the Republican leader of Kentucky, and Chuck Schumer, who's the Democratic leader from New York. There are some Republicans who would like to hear from folks like Hunter Biden. There are other Republicans who don't want that kind of a little bit of a circus, maybe you might describe it, on the Senate floor. And so because there is this disagreement among Republicans, I think McConnell is a little bit more interested in just having no witnesses at all, whereas Schumer does have this interest in hearing from these specific witnesses who might have additional information that could change people's minds. So it would take 67 senators, so 2/3 of the Senate, to vote in favor of removal. I think that probability of that happening is extremely low. I don't really think anyone expects that there will be that many Republican senators who kind of change their minds, go against what they've said already, and vote for conviction. So then the question becomes, are there 51 senators? That would be a kind of politically consequential number, even though it would have no effect in terms of removing the president from office. That takes 6 years.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday said that the impeachment of President Trump was based on made-up grounds, adding he did not believe it marked the end of the U.S. president. Speaking at his marathon end-of-year news conference, President Putin described the events in the U.S. legislature as simply the continuation of an internal political fight between Democrats and Republicans. Let's listen in.
Сенат, либо республиканцев, насколько мне известно, большинство, и вряд ли они захотят представителей своей партии отстранить от власти по каким-то, на мой взгляд, абсолютно надуманным причинам.
Now, he reproached the journalist who asked the question for speaking about President Trump as if he is finished. President Putin indicated he believed this was only a pretext used by the Democrats to impeach President Trump after failing to corner him over claims that Moscow interfered in the presidential elections that brought him to power. He said the Democrats accused Trump of a plot with Russia, and then it emerged that there was no kind of plot. It could not be the basis of an impeachment, said the president. Then they thought up some kind of pressure on Ukraine. In other news, Australia set a record for its hottest day ever for a second straight day, with an average national maximum temperature of 41.9 degrees Celsius or 107.4 degrees Fahrenheit. That is a full degree higher than the previous mark, according to officials. The Bureau of Meteorology said the new nationally average maximum was reached Wednesday, topping the 40.9 degrees hit Tuesday, which beat the previous record of 40.3 degrees centigrade in January of 2013. As the heat wave continued, Thursday saw the highest December temperature ever reached in Australia when the West Australian town of Eucla hit 49.8 degrees Celsius, that is 121.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The previous hottest December day was 49.5 degrees Celsius in Birdsville, Queensland in 1972. The heat wave has exacerbated an unprecedented drought-fueled series of bushfires ravaging large areas of Australia. Meanwhile, a state of emergency was also declared in Australia's most populated region as the unprecedented heat wave fanned out-of-control bushfires. It destroyed homes, it smothered huge areas with toxic smoke. In New South Wales, Australia's most populated state with Sydney as its capital, more than 100 bushfires were burning on Thursday, and many of them are out of control.
Yeah, well, the valley behind us, that's where it is at the moment. So if the winds change, it can always come back up to bite us. So, yeah. Well, we are under the evacuation sort of thing as far as I'm aware. So I don't know if it's too late now to go. But, yeah, we just have to wait and see what the winds do now. Hopefully the danger's past, but it's fire.
Meanwhile, Moscow registered the warmest December weather in over a century on Wednesday, as an unusually snowless month put winter activities on hold and it even confused plants into blooming. The Phobos Weather Center said northern Moscow registered a temperature of 5.4 degrees Celsius or 41.7 degrees Fahrenheit. It said, quote, "This is a new record of maximum air temperature for December 18, surpassing a previous record of 5.3 degrees set in 1886. The Russian capital, normally covered with a blanket of snow by mid-December, thus far has had a snowless and cloudy winter, and the Russian Weather Service warned Wednesday that it may get even warmer. A botanical garden in Moscow this week announced that its snowdrop flowers, which normally indicate the first signs of spring, were blooming because they, quote, were confused. They confused winter and spring. In other news, tens of thousands of pigs have died from African swine fever in Indonesia's North Sumatra province, according to officials on Thursday. It's the first time the virus has been detected in the country. The disease has devastated swine herds in China and elsewhere in Asia, and initially, Indonesia authorities put the death of 27,000 pigs down to hog cholera, a different virus with similar symptoms. But Fajar Sumping Catur Rasa, an official at Indonesia's Ministry of Agriculture, said that laboratory tests had recorded evidence of African swine fever in 16 regencies and cities in North Sumatra. While the virus cannot be transmitted to humans, it's almost 100% fatal in pigs. Although Indonesia is the world's most populous Muslim nation and eating pork is forbidden by the Quran, the country also boasts a small non-Muslim majority in North Sumatra, and Bali is a Hindu island whose signature dish is roast pig. The UN's Food and Agriculture Agency said it was working with the government on containment, but the outbreak in Indonesia poses unique challenges. Unlike China, where huge herds are reared and processed in factory-like conditions, and outbreaks can be contained. In Indonesia, most pigs are raised in backyard sties or on small farms and sold at markets where the virus can easily spread. In other news, a total of 782 aftershocks were recorded from last weekend's magnitude 6.9 earthquake that struck Mindanao, and the death toll from the tremor has already rose to 9. FIVOC said the strongest aftershock occurred at 4:18 a.m. and registered a magnitude of 5.3. It was felt at intensity 5, classified as strong in Digo City, Davao del Sur, and intensity 4, moderately strong in General Santos City. Today, a 4.5 magnitude earthquake struck Sultan Kudarat. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology, or FIVOC, said the quake was of tectonic in origin, and it hit 7 kilometers northeast of Lutayan at 6:11 p.m. FIVOC's director, Renato Solidum Jr., warned that aftershocks may last for weeks. Meanwhile, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council said the death toll has increased to 9, with 111 injured and 1 missing. The report, signed and released by the NDRRMC Executive Director Ricardo Jalad said the dead and injured are from Davao region and Soxargen. The number of affected families is placed at 29,592, which is equivalent to 121,221 persons residing in 105 barangays in Davao region. Of these, a total of 3,076 families or 14,993 persons are taking temporary shelter in 24 evacuation centers, while 4,379 families are being aided outside. Also, 290 schools were partially damaged by the earthquake in Davao region and Soxargen. About 182,000 people have been forced to flee from their homes due to floodings across Somalia, particularly in the southern areas of the country. Take a look.
Okay, let's go.
The world needs to transform the way it responds to refugee situations and do more for the struggling countries that shelter almost all of them. That is according to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres at a high-level forum seeking solutions to a turbulent decade of mass displacement. More must be done to protect refugees, respect their rights, and address the reasons why people leave their homes in the first place, he told the World Refugee Forum in Geneva, meeting for the first time. In his appeal for joint action, Mr. Guterres described last December's Global Compact on Refugees as, quote, our collective achievement and our collective responsibility, which speaks to the heart of the missions of the UN. Now, in reference to the main international agreements that have for decades underpinned assistance to refugees, the Secretary General said that there is a need today to reestablish the integrity of the international refugee protection regime based on the 1951 Refugee Convention and 1967 Protocol. Here's more.
Now more than ever, we need international cooperation and practical, effective responses. And this is the reason why we are here. We need better answers for those we flee and better help for communities and countries that receive and host them. More fundamentally, we need to re-establish the integrity of the international refugee protection regime with the 1951 Refugee Convention and the 1967 Protocol at its core. Indeed, at a time when the right to asylum is under assault, when so many borders and doors are being closed to refugees, when even child refugees can be divided from their families, we need to reaffirm the human rights of refugees. The Global Compact on Refugees gives us the blueprint. I urge you to be bold and concrete in the pledges you will make. This is a moment for ambition. It is a moment to jettison a model of support that too often left refugees for decades with their lives on hold, confined to camps, just scraping by, unable to flourish or contribute. It is a moment to build a more equitable response to refugee crises through a sharing of responsibility. The Global Compact on Refugees is our collective achievement and our collective responsibility. It speaks to the plight of millions of people, and it speaks to the heart of the mission of the United Nations.
The first ever Global Refugee Forum is bringing together refugees, heads of state and government, UN leaders, international institutions, development organizations, business leaders, and civil society representatives, among others, at the UN in Geneva. UN Refugee Agency, or UNHCR, is co-hosting the forum together with Switzerland, and it's being co-convened by Costa Rica, Ethiopia, Germany, Pakistan, and Turkey. And the aim of the forum is to generate new approaches and long-term commitments from a variety of actors to help refugees and the communities in which they live. Worldwide, over 70 million people are displaced by war, conflict, and persecution. Eagle News will be right back.
At the famous pyramids of Giza. Stay tuned to watch Digital Net every Tuesday and Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Reporting from EBC Egypt Bureau, I'm Zara Angeles Valdez, and I am 1 with 25.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to leave some love by giving it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe here at EBC Digital Net so you don't miss any of our upcoming features.
Welcome back. Exiled former Pakistan military leader Pervez Musharraf dismissed the unprecedented treason conviction and death sentence handed to him earlier this week, saying the ruling was the result of a personal vendetta. The special court's decision announced Tuesday marked the first time a former leader of the armed forces has been convicted of treason and sentenced to death in Pakistan, where the military wields enormous power and has ruled the country for roughly half its 72-year history. Take a look.
ये केस सिर्फ कुछ लोगों की मेरे खिलाफ जाती अदावत की वजह से इस केस को टेकअप किया गया और सुना गया, और ये एक फर्द वाहिद को टारगेट किया गया, और उन लोगों ने टारगेट किया जो ऊंचे ओहदों पे फाइज हैं और अपने ओहदे की गलत इस्तेमाल करते हैं। मेरे खिलाफ जो स्पेशल कोर्ट ने आर्टिकल 6 केस के ऊपर फैसला सुनाया, वो मैंने टेलीविजन पे पहली दफा मैंने सुना। ये फैसले, ऐसे फैसले की पहले कोई मिसाल नहीं मिलती कि ना तो डिफेंडेंट को ना उसके वकील को इजाजत मिली हो कि वो अपनी दिफा में बात कर सके।
The former Pakistani leader, who is reportedly in Dubai and in poor health, appeared in a hospital bed in the video looking frail and was straining to speak, as we heard there. The former general, however, said he remained undecided on his next move or whether his legal team was planning to appeal the conviction. The ruling has infuriated Pakistani security establishment, with the military spokesman swiftly condemning the verdict and saying the armed forces were in pain and anguish over the decision. In November of 2007, General Musharraf suspended the constitution and imposed emergency rule, a move which sparked protests. He resigned in 2008 to avoid the threat of impeachment. When Mr. Sharif, an old rival whom he deposed in the 1999 coup, was elected prime minister in 2013, he initiated a treason trial against General Musharraf, and in March of 2014, the former general was charged for high treason. General Musharraf argued the case was politically motivated and that the actions he took in 2007 were agreed by the government and cabinet. But his arguments were turned down by the courts and he was accused of acting illegally. According to the Pakistani constitution, anyone convicted of high treason could face the death penalty. General Musharraf traveled to Dubai in 2016 after a travel ban was lifted, and he has refused to appear before the court despite multiple orders. To India now, authorities got cell phone access in parts of Delhi and fresh violence erupted elsewhere as thousands of protesters nationwide defied the bans on assembly in growing anger at a new citizenship law seen as anti-Muslim. Take a look.
And they've imposed Section 144 in a number of these places to keep us indoors. But I think there's enough of us here to say that we're not going to stay indoors. Whatever this government does, we're watching them and we're not going to stay indoors.
वार्निंग दी जा रही है कि यहाँ से तितर-बितर हो रहे हैं, नहीं तो आप पे कार्रवाई की जाएगी। आपको सभी को यहाँ पे वार्निंग दी जा रही है कि यहाँ से तितर-बितर हो रहे हैं, यहाँ पे धारा 144 है, नहीं तो आपके खिलाफ कार्रवाई की जाएगी।
Police and demonstrators clashed in Uttar Pradesh state as security forces bundled demonstrators, including an internationally famous historian, onto buses in Delhi and Bangalore at 19 metro stations were shut in the capital and major roads blocked. The new law eases citizenship rules for people fleeing persecution from 3 neighboring countries, but excludes Muslims. And that stoked accusations that Prime Minister Narendra Modi wants to reshape India as a Hindu nation and it created unease abroad. 7 months after Modi swept to a second term, India has seen a week of protests in which 4 people were shot dead, dozens injured and hundreds arrested, while authorities have banned gatherings in areas that together are home to hundreds of millions of people. They included all of Uttar Pradesh and Bangalore, areas of the northeast, and parts of Bihar, New Delhi, Hyderabad, and Chennai. All of them have seen protests in recent days, and in the case of the capital, riots and police storming a university. Delhi police spokesman M.S. Randhawa told AFP that, quote, people should seek permission to assemble at places where the ban is not in place. And staying in India, the country leads the world in pollution-linked deaths, followed by China and Nigeria, according to a report published Wednesday that estimated the global impact of contaminants in the air, water, and workplace.
It happened last year, it happened last year before last, but everybody kept quiet. Nobody did anything about it. 10 months have gone by. Why wasn't something done? So let's forget about that. We should now concentrate to sort out for next year so that next year doesn't happen.
The report by the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution, or GAHP, found pollution to be the largest environmental cause of premature death on the planet, causing 15% of all deaths, some 8.3 million people. Among the 10 countries with the most pollution deaths in 2017, the latest year for which data was available were some of the world's largest and wealthiest nations, along with some poorer ones. India and China led in the number of pollution deaths with about 2.3 million and 1.8 million deaths, respectively, followed by Nigeria, Indonesia, and Pakistan. The United States, with 325 million people, came in at number 7 with almost 200,000 deaths. Rachel Kupka, Acting Executive Director of GAHP, or Global Alliance on Health and Pollution, said the report reminds us all that pollution is a global crisis. In other news, Lebanon's president started consultations to pick a replacement for Saad Hariri, who resigned 7 weeks ago under pressure from an unprecedented wave of protests. Hassan Diab, a professor at the American University of Beirut and a former education minister, was tipped by Lebanese media as Hariri's likely successor. A new government is urgently needed to tackle a spiraling economic crisis which has left the country teetering on the brink of default. President Michel Aoun launched the twice-delayed official talks to designate a new prime minister after Hariri announced on Wednesday he would not seek to keep his job. The 49-year-old had in recent days been seen as the most likely choice to head a technocrat-dominated government, but he announced late Wednesday he was pulling off. Hariri resigned on October 29, nearly 2 weeks into a nationwide cross-sectarian protest movement demanding the wholesale removal of a political elite seen as corrupt and incompetent. Lebanon has been ruled by the same political clans and families since the 1975 to 1990 civil war, and protesters have pushed for a technocratic government. staying in Lebanon burnt out vehicles and debris in Beirut following violent overnight clashes between the Lebanese security forces and supporters of the Shiite movements Hezbollah and Amal. Take a look. And before we go on a break, the masterminds of the Philippines' worst political massacre were found guilty on Thursday of murdering 57 people, a rare conviction of powerful personalities in a country known for its culture of impunity. Officials said the gunmen slaughtered 58 people a decade ago and dumped their bodies in pits as part of a mass killing, though only 57 bodies were recovered. Leaders of the Ampatuan family, a powerful political dynasty, had been accused of orchestrating the killings in a bid to quash an election challenge from a rival clan. Some 32 journalists were among those murdered on November 23, 2009, making the massacre also one of the worst ever of media workers. A Manila court on Thursday found 43 people guilty as principals or accessories to 57 murders led by Andal Ampatuan Jr., who had been planning to run for provincial governor against the rival. As principal suspects, Ampatuan and 27 others, including 7 of his relatives, were each sentenced to 30 years in jail without parole, according to the court ruling.
As principal, namely Datu Andal. Prosecution having established the guilt beyond reasonable doubt of the following accused who are found to have acted as principal, namely Datu Andal Unsay Ampatuan Jr., Datu Anwar Sajid Datu Ulo Ampatuan, Datu Anwar Datu Ipi Ampatuan Jr., Police Inspector Saudi Muhammad, PO1. They are hereby convicted and sentenced to suffer the penalty of imprisonment of reclusion perpetua without paroles pursuant to RA 9346.
14 members of the local police and a member of the Ampatuan family's armed militia force were sentenced to between 8 and 10 years in prison as accessories. 2 clan leaders and more than 50 others, mostly police officers and alleged members of the Ampatuan militia, were acquitted either on reasonable doubt or the prosecution's failure to prove their guilt. The judge also dismissed the charges over the 58th victim, whose body was not found save for his dentures.
Convict na gid ang mga mastermind, pero may kahalo gyapon siya nga kalain kay tungod si Sajid ba no? O si Sajid na-acquit pagkauban ang mga officers, mga police.
Sa tanan kami mga anak sa biktima kay ang karang ilang pila lang ka taon nga pagkakulong kay dili jud matumbasan ang dili na mo makita nga mga ginikanan. Isud para sa mudawato na amo ginapaglaban. Isud bata pa lang ko sa tunga, 7 months pa lang ko. Subong na nagdako na ko nga 10 years old na ko. Subong hindi ko dapat nakita. Hostisya. Kag may sakit pag ako, wala silang may mabulig sa akon.
We'll be back with more news right after this break.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced, eagle news, because we live in interesting times.
China announced a list of U.S. chemicals that will be exempted from import tariffs just under a week after Beijing and Washington agreed a trade agreement that dialed down tensions between the two. The world's biggest economies have exchanged blows for more than a year. On Friday, announced a mini agreement to reduce some levies in a bruising trade war that has dragged on global growth. Beijing released a list on Thursday of products that will no longer be subject to tariffs, including certain types of industrial glue and adhesives, industrial polymers, and types of paraffin, which can be found in cosmetics and food. The exemptions will come into force from December 26 until December 25 next year, according to a statement from the Customs Tariff Commission of the State Council. Last week's Phase 1 deal saw U.S. President Donald Trump cancel a planned new wave of tariffs on Chinese products, and China in turn saying it would suspend additional measures on U.S. goods. In September, China said it would exempt 16 categories of U.S. products from tariffs, including seafood items and anti-cancer drugs. China announced earlier this month that it will offer a tariff waiver to some imports of major products, U.S. soybean and pork. Beijing has increased tariffs on U.S. pork 3 times since the trade war started. And a grueling French transport strike over a planned pension reform entered its 3rd week on Thursday, with little relief in sight after talks between unions and the government failed to bring the two sides any closer to a compromise. We're still very, very far from any agreement, that is according to Laurent Berger of the CFDT, France's biggest union, and he said this after a marathon day of union meetings with Prime Minister Edouard Philippe. More talks are scheduled for Thursday, and President Emmanuel Macron has indicated he's willing to improve his plan to eliminate dozens of separate pension schemes by creating a single points-based system. But unions balk in particular at a new pivot age of 64 that workers would have to reach in order to receive a full pension beyond the official retirement age of 62. Berger, whose moderate union supports a single system, said that Philippe again said he would insist on this pivot age and that we told him that that was not an option for us. Other unions have demanded the reform be abandoned completely and are banking on public transport for a strike that has wreaked havoc on daily commutes and now looks set to jeopardize holiday travel plans. Trade in the Asia-Pacific region has declined for the first time since the global economic crisis a decade ago, the UN Office for the Region, ESCAP, reported on Wednesday. Now, total export volume fell by 2.5% this year, while import volume decreased by 3.5%. Although economies are expected to bounce back in 2020, ESCAP said they are still facing risks related to trade tensions between the U.S. and China. The global slowdown in economic growth, combined with the heightened tensions, also affected merchandise trade in the region, particularly for economies closely integrated with China. The UN office estimated that the tariff war's impact on gross domestic product, or GDP, could reach as much as $400 billion worldwide and $117 billion in the region. ESCAP Chief Armida Salcia Alice Jabana said the challenge for Asia-Pacific is to increase trade and deepen economic integration to support sustainable development. She also welcomed the recent Phase 1 deal between the U.S. and China, adding that it should reduce policy uncertainty. ESCAP projects that new guarantees under the agreement might boost investor and consumer confidence enough to realize around 1.5% growth next year, mostly in developing countries. To Florida now, where Tampa's new and fun form of public transport is the e-scooter. Here's Abby Aragon to tell us more about it.
One exciting way to travel the city is by scooter. Here in Tampa, Florida, the latest trends and a fast way to get around the city is by e-scooters. People can be seen riding them down the streets and all over the place. Let's try it out too. As cities develop and expand, transportation methods must keep up with growing demand. Other forms of transportation commonly used in cities include trains, buses, and rideshare apps. But a way to incorporate a little fun into your morning commute or a stroll through the city is by scooter. Upgraded from the typical scooters we had in our childhood, e-scooters are faster, easily accessible, and environmentally friendly. The e-scooters were implemented to reduce traffic and increase mobility at a lower price. They've also made them super easy to use. All you have to do is download an app for which scooter you're using, then follow the instructions given to you. Tampa residents seem to enjoy the scooters and like to use it for recreational purposes.
Okay, yeah, it was good. It was a good experience. It's not hard at all. It's cheap. It's something to do while you're out here. You should try it. It's pretty fun.
The e-scooters are becoming increasingly popular in Tampa, and unsurprisingly, nearby cities are starting to consider following Tampa's lead, with the scooters being both economically and environmentally friendly. Now you can ride around your favorite city and see all the best sights. But remember to stay safe. I'm Abby Aragon from Tampa, Florida, and I'm 1 with 25.
And staying in Florida, in XFL, the Tampa Bay Vipers wrapped up their mini camp. Our EBC Florida Bureau, Jay Rosquitas, has this report.
Throughout the month of December, the XFL made its progression to the long-awaited inaugural season by launching various organized team activities, or OTAs, and mini-camps. Among the 8 teams, the Tampa Bay Vipers ended their mini-camps with a high note. During their training in Plant City, we asked some of the players their takeaways from the mini-camps.
My takeaways from this camp are a bunch of things. Mainly, we got a better understanding of what the defensive coaches are asking for us to do on the defensive line, and that's going to be huge because at the end of the day, he wants us to be explosive and think of speed every snap.
Really, from the mini camps, to just getting a better knowledge of the offense, gelling with the guys we're going to be working with, the rest of the teammates, and just building a camaraderie within the group.
With less than 2 months remaining until the XFL season officially starts, some players set personal goals to showcase their ability to still play.
My goals coming up from this upcoming season is just to show people that I still have a lot of football left in me.
While others hope to be victorious and one day step back into the NFL.
The goals for this year is just play great football, have a lot of fun, win a lot of games, and win the championship here as well, and then individually to get back into the NFL and try to make my mark there as well.
All 8 XFL teams will meet in Houston in the coming weeks for scrimmaging and prepare for the start of the 2020 season. Signing off from Plant City, this is Jay Rosquitas, always 1 with 25.
Thank you, Jay, and that's the news for tonight. Join us online and here again tomorrow evening. From all of us here at Eagle News, I'm Alma Angeles, always 1 with 25. Good night.